Hey everyone, Nick from Accounting Add-ons here, and in this video I'll show you how to create a profit and loss report in Power BI using OdataLink that downloads data from MYOB and specifically the AccountRegister Endpoint. Now the advantage of using the AccountRegister Endpoint is that it stores totals per month for all the different financial periods. So it actually is a bit quicker to download than using the journal transactions. Now the profit and loss report we'll create will have essentially a few key features. We'll use the chart of account from MYOB and we'll be able to create values for detail accounts such as sales spring water, for header accounts such as sales income, for accounts classification or totals such as income, as well as have totals like gross profit, operating profit, and net profit. Now we'll do this in different steps so that it's very clear and simple to follow. Let's get into it. Now we'll start off with an empty Power BI desktop workbook. And the first thing we'll do is download our data that we need. So I'll jump to OdataLink, I'll go to the OData Feeds page, and I'll copy the OData Feed URL I want to use. I'll jump back into Power BI, I'll go get data from OData Feed, I'll paste my URL, and I'll click OK. Now there's a few endpoints we'll want to use. We'll want to use the account register, the accounts endpoint, the accounts classifications, accounts totals, as well as the dates by month. Once I've selected these, I can click transform. This will take me to Power Query where I can transform the data. Now we'll start with the dates by month endpoint. In our report, we use it to actually create the column headers 01 July, 02 August, 03 September, as well as the financial year slicer. If I go back to Power Query, we can see that it's got a dates by month ID, and that's going to be used to actually create a relationship with the account register endpoint on the dates by month ID. So we'll definitely want to keep that column. We'll want to go to the financial year and filter it for specific years. I'll choose 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022, as well as 2023. And I'll click OK. Now, once we've filtered the financial year, we'll remove all the columns we're not interested in. We're not interested in the financial month, calendar year, calendar month, as well as those dates. We'll remove that. The display string column provides a series of formatted strings that actually represents how you can display your calendar period or your financial period. P represents for financial period, M represents the month, Y represents the year. We'll want to use PPMMM, which is the one that stores 2 digits for the month and 3 digits for the actual letters of the month. So 01 for July, 02 August, and onwards. And that's it for the dates by month. The next table we'll edit is the accounts table. We'll remove the data file as we're not interested in that field. We'll remove the type, number, description. We will keep the parent account for now. We'll remove is active, tax code, level, opening balance, current balance. We will keep the fact that it's a header or not, and we'll remove the rest of the fields. Now that'll give us the bare skeleton we want to use. We'll expand the parent account because we'll be interested in doing account hierarchies. So we'll pull the parent account UID field. I will rename it to be simpler. So I'll just remove the period there so that it's parent account UID. I'll right click and rename the account UID field to account UID. I'll right click and rename the name column to account name. And I'll do the same thing for the display ID. I'll call it account number. And I'm just doing that so that the names are a bit more intuitive. And finally, we'll add one last column. So we'll go add column, custom column, and we'll create a field called account number and name that'll concatenate the account number with a space with the account name. And that'll be the field we use to display the data. Finally, we'll just reorder the columns to make it a bit easier to use. And that's it for our accounts table. The next table we'll edit is the account register. We'll remove the data file because we're not going to be interested in that. We'll remove the UID as it's a field that's not really useful. We'll keep the account column and we'll expand it to include the UID. And similarly, we'll rename it in the formula bar so that it's called account UID. Now we'll keep the dates by month ID because we're going to use that to join onto our dates by month table, but we'll remove the year and the month. The year and month are actually calendar year and calendar month, and we'd rather use a financial period and tie it into a financial year. So that's why we use the dates by month table. We'll also remove the unit count and the row version. Now finally, we'll want to create a custom field that combines the activity, the adjustment, the year-end activity, and the year-end adjustment as a single total so that it's a lot easier to chart. I'll go add column, custom column. I will call it movement, and it will be the sum of activity plus adjustment plus year-end activity plus year-end adjustment, and I'll click OK. It'll be added to the end of my table. Now we'll also need to set the data type for this field. At the moment you can see it shows up as ABC123, which is essentially a general field, but we want to make sure it's a number. And there's two different ways of doing it. We can right click on the column, change type to decimal number, and that'll ensure it shows up as 1.2 or a decimal type. Or alternatively, when we add the custom field in our formula bar, there's a hidden parameter where we can do decimal dot type. So the third parameter allows us to set the type, in this case to decimal, and if we do that, we don't have to transform the type. It does it automatically as part of the formula. Both approaches do essentially the same thing. It's up to you to choose the one you're more comfortable with. And finally, we can remove the activity, adjustment, year-end activity, and year-end adjustment, as we won't be needing them. For the account classifications table, we're really only interested if it's a profit and loss account or not. So we'll keep the first two fields and remove the rest. And finally, we won't touch the accounts total table just yet. We'll click close and apply to return to Power BI. Now once the data is loaded into Power BI, the next step will be to manage the relationship between our tables. So I'll right click, manage relationships, and what we'll need to do is set them up. Now if they've already detected some, I'll remove them just to show you how to do them from scratch. The first thing we'll do is click new. We'll choose our AccountRegister Endpoint, choose the account ID, and map it to the account UID of the accounts table. We'll do the same thing for the AccountRegister Dates by Month ID, map it to the Dates by Month table, Dates by Month ID field. And lastly, we'll map the accounts table's classification column to the accounts classification table classification column. And I'll click OK. If I click close, our relationships are good to go. To create the skeleton for our report, what we'll start with is a matrix table. And we'll expand it to fit most of the area. The next thing we'll do is we'll use the dates by month display string as our column header. We'll use the accounts number and name as our rows. And we'll go to the account register movement field as our values. And that'll create the bare structure of our report. We'll also add a slicer, which we'll put around the side. And in that slicer, we'll pull the financial year. Now you can see the financial years appearing as 2019 and 2023, but with a range slider. We don't really want to do that. And it's doing that because the financial year is set to a numerical data type. We'll want to change that to text so we can get tick boxes. So to do that, we'll edit our dates by month, edit the query. We'll go to the financial year, change type to text. We'll click close and apply. And if we do that and wait for it to refresh, you'll notice we get tick boxes for the financial year. And in this specific case, 2020 as our financial year with data, which has the most amount of data. To only include profit and loss accounts, we'll expand the accounts classification. We'll take the is profit and loss field and drop it on filters on this page and set it to true. So that's the start for the skeleton. If we look at the report we want to create, the first thing we'll want to do is the account hierarchy so that we've got header accounts. To do that, we'll go to our accounts table and we'll need to add some DAX formulas to create this hierarchy. So we'll right click and choose new column. And the first column we'll add will be called account path ID. And this formula is very specialized. We'll use the path function to create a path that can navigate the chart of account. So we'll use the account's account ID as the source, and the parent column will be the account's parent account UID. So this sets up an account path ID, and this allows us to then add extra fields that will be able to navigate the account hierarchy. Now the next column we'll add will be to add our account number level 1. So we'll call it account number name L1, and we'll use a lookup value that'll try to find the account's account number and name by using the account's account UID, but it will look inside the path ID column that we created, and we'll use the path item function to do that. And we'll specify account path ID as the path, and we'll want the first position. If we close our parenthesis, that'll add a field to pull our account number name level 1. Now if we remove the account number and name that we currently have and instead grab this path function, we can actually see we can pull our header accounts. Now we'll copy that formula and we'll repeat it a few times for all the different levels. So for level 2, we'll call it L2 and we'll pass in index number 2. For level 3, we'll call it L3 and we'll pass in the third index. And finally for the fourth one, we'll call it level 4 and we'll pass in the fourth index. Now once our fields are defined, we'll drag them into our report. Now we'll right click, expand and expand all. Now we'll notice a couple of things. We've got lots of blank rows, and this is because there are some accounts that don't have level 4 accounts. So we'll actually collapse it to the third level, which is account sales spring water. So we'll choose that account, collapse entire level, so we've got 3 levels. Now we'll also notice we've got still blank rows remaining, and not only that, our totals don't seem to add up. We've got values repeated multiple times for different accounts, and it rolls into a header and then it rolls further into the header. It's triple counting the same values. Now the simplest way to illustrate why that's happening is by going back to a blank AccountRegister endpoint without any manipulation. Now if I expand the account column to include the name and the display ID, I'll just reorder those. I'll pick a single month and I'll pick 2022-07. And if I scroll across, I'll hide the year, the month, and I'll keep the activity. Now if we look at this and we sort our account ascending, we can actually see we've got GST collected and liabilities with 255. That rolls up to total liabilities with 255. We've got current earnings and income, sales income, and sales water all with the same amount. And it's essentially that's happening behind the scenes on the AccountRegister endpoint. We have values not just at the detail level, such as GST collected and paid, but we've also got it at the liabilities header. We've got it at the asset header. We've got it at current assets. And every header we have will repeat the values of the childs below it. And that's what we need to fix. Now to fix that, we'll add another DAX measure. So we'll right click and choose new measure instead of new column. And we'll call our measure movement 1 detail. Throughout the report, we'll end up setting up 3 different movement fields, and we'll call the first one detail. Now, what this field needs to do is a calculate function. It'll need to sum the account register's movement field. But it'll also need to apply a filter on the accounts table where the accounts is header is set to false. Now, this will ensure it only totals detail accounts. And if I hit enter, I've declared my measure. Now, instead of using the movement field, we'll remove that from the values and we'll drag in our movement 1 field. And we can actually see now the totals are looking much better. It's removed the blank rows that were appearing, and it also makes sure that the totals only roll up correctly. So this 441 is rolling up. These numbers here are rolling up to be 1,000, rolling up with the 9,000, and rolling up to be 11. So the numbers are actually totaling the way they're meant to. Now that we've got our account hierarchy sorted, we'll be adding our totals. And to do that, we'll go back to Power Query and edit our accounts total table. Now, the accounts total table is a specialized table that we've created that has all the different labels you need to create your profit and loss, your balance sheet, or your trial balance report. It has the name of the total, whether it's a profit and loss or a balance sheet, whether it's an account classification in its own right, such as income or cost of sales, or whether it's not, such as gross profit, which is a total of the other two. And then it has a table of classifications embedded in so that it knows how to actually total and grab the values from different account classifications. The first thing we'll do is we'll actually add a step so that we can actually buffer this table, because we will need to use this table in 2 different styles. One style will be exactly like it looks like right now, but the other style will be that we want to expand the classification. Now, if we didn't buffer the table and we reference the table twice, we'd end up having a situation where we're pulling the same table twice through OdataLink, which slows things down. So adding this table.buffer step as the first step ensures that we're only pulling the table once from OdataLink, caching it in Power Query and Power BI, and then we can then reference it as many times as we need. Now, I'll take a step back. To do that, we'll go right-click, insert step after. We'll type in table.buffer at the start of our name of the table, and we'll hit enter. And this will ensure it's buffered and can be used multiple times. The next step we'll do is we'll right-click on the accounts total table, and we'll choose reference. And this will allow us to have a second copy of this table that references the first one. You can see in the formula bar, it's set to equal accounts total, which is equal to this whole series of instructions. We'll rename this new table accounts totals classifications. We'll place it where we want to. And what we'll do with this table is navigate the classification column. So we'll click to expand it, and we want to include the classification and the sign. We'll untick the user original name so that we can keep these names intact. That'll pull these 2 fields, and we'll remove the other 4 columns from this reference of the accounts total. So we'll have the total name, what classification it needs to sum, and whether it sums it positively or negatively. So you can see gross profit sums income as a positive, but it pulls cost of sales as a negative. Now, this is a reference of the table. Accounts total classifications will look like this, and accounts total will just have the raw lines and their names. Once we've done that, we've finished with Power Query, and we can click Close and Apply and return to Power BI. Now, the first thing we'll do is we'll manage our relationships. And we want to make sure we've got a relationship between accounts and accounts classification, between accounts totals classification and accounts totals, and between accounts totals classification and accounts classification. But we'll need to do a small edit to all 3 relationships for the report to work correctly, because these relationships are starting to get complicated. Now, if we don't do that edit and we grab the account total name and place it on our report, you'll notice that we've got a total now called assets, but it's made up of income, cost of sales, expenses. It doesn't make sense. And that's because Power BI is going to struggle to navigate through the data. So to fix that, we'll go back to Manage Relationship, and for all three of these relationships, we'll edit them. And where it says cross-filter direction, we want to make sure it's set to both, so that it can navigate from one table to the other in one direction, but also from the opposite direction, from accounts classification back to accounts. And we'll need to do that for all three tables. If we do that small change and click OK, we'll notice that our report now is looking better. We've got cost of sales made up of cost of sales account, expenses made up of expense accounts. We've got gross profit made up of income and cost of sales, and we'll correct that total so that we don't see the breakdown. And this is starting to look like what it's meant to. The one thing we do notice is the order is out of whack. Now, to fix that, we'll go to our table panel in Power BI and we'll choose our accounts totals table. Now, by default, when you sort a field, it'll be sorted alphabetically based on the field you include. So it's sorting by account total name right now. If I were to sort ascending descending, assets come first, followed by cost of sales, followed by equity, followed by expense, and this is what we're seeing on our report. But we actually want to sort this column by another one. What we'll do is we'll highlight that column, we'll choose sort by column, and we'll choose the order column. Now, if we do that, it's going to sort the total name based on the order column. And if we return to our report, we can see income is first, followed by cost of sales, followed by gross profit. And this is the order that we want. So in Power BI, you can have a column that you sort based on another column. And this is done through the Table tab by highlighting a column and choosing what other column do you use to sort it. So that solves our sorting problem. Now, the other problem we face is the gross profit. We don't want to see the breakdown of the values. And not only that, if I collapse the header accounts for that section, we'll notice that income, 11,615, plus 240 cost of sales is totaling to 1856. And we don't want that to happen. We want it to sum correctly and reverse, essentially remove the cost of sales from the income to generate the gross profit figure. Now, to do that, we'll add a few more DAX measures. We'll need to add two more. One to solve the totaling side of things, and one to remove the breakdown. We'll start with the totaling side. So we'll right-click on our account register table and choose New Measure, and we'll call it movement2 underscore for totals. Now, this formula will use the SumX function, which allows us to sum one value multiplied by another. So for our table, the field that contains the DRCR sign comes from our accounts totals classifications table. So we'll pass in accounts totals classifications, and then we'll sum our movement detail 1, multiply it by the value of accounts totals classifications DRCR sign. We'll put a close bracket and we'll hit enter. Now that adds the measure, and if we remove movement 1 detail and drag this one instead, we can actually see now that gross profit 11,615 minus 240 is generating 11,375. So that is actually correcting the anomaly that the numbers are actually summing up the way they're meant to. Now the next step is to remove the breakdown. Now to do that, we'll need to use an if statement, and we'll use the is accounts classification field Now that returns true if a total is an account classification in its own right, and false if it's not. So we'll right click and add our new measure, and we'll call it movement3 underscore final. And this formula will use an if statement to control when the value displays. The first thing we want to establish is we only want to do it for rows that are not account classification. We'll use the selected value function to do that. We'll pull the selected value of the accounts totals is classification where it's set to false. So we only want to do it for total rows or non-classification ones. And we only want to do it for rows that are actually accounts that are being displayed as accounts on my chart. So we'll use an isFiltered accounts equals true. Now what essentially this does is if my row's not an account classification, but it is an accounts row, we want to return a different value. In this case, we'll want to return a blank value. Blank are rarely charted in Power BI unless you force it to do so. So by returning a blank value, it ensures the value won't appear and the row won't appear. So we'll use blank. But if it's not that, we'll want to use our field movement2 for totals. If we do that and hit enter, and if we remove movement2 and put movement3, we can actually see gross profit is now non-collapsible. I cannot expand it to see the detail. Now this ensures that it'll never show the detail. It'll always be a single row for gross profit. It won't show the breakdown of which account contributed to the gross profit. And that's what we want. If we scroll down, we can see the same thing happened to operating profit. And if we scroll down, the same thing happened to net profit. Now we can actually see that we've got some rows that only had level 2 accounts, so we can collapse these one individually so that we don't see the breakdown. And finally, we can also remove our grand total because in this report it doesn't make any sense. So to do that, we'll select our chart, we'll go to the visualization format, we'll go to row subtotals, we'll apply it per row, and we'll go to account total and we'll turn it off. Now each column or each row that you drag into your report can have its own total, and you get to control whether you want to show a total at this level or not. And in our case, we don't want to total all the account totals together, so we basically turn that off. Now that still means that account totals will have values, but they won't be totaling themselves into a grand total at the bottom. And that's pretty much it in terms of the report. We've basically pulled our accounts, we've pulled our account headers, we've added our totals, we're basically good to go. Now I hope you found building this report interesting, and if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to jump on the chat or send us an email so we can assist. Catch you next time. Take care. Hey, Nick here. Now these videos take quite a bit of time to create and refine, and we hope you find them useful. We understand though that they're mostly useful when you're first starting off trying to get your bearings, whether that's with Power BI, MYOB, Excel, or Xero. So if you have any specific questions you'd like us to answer, let us know, and we'll aim to prioritize those as best we can. Take care.